So here's one that fascinates me, and it's something that I've only recently kind of come into in terms of ideas and concepts for the way that the world works. So it's really a simple one, which is that only about 50% of all men historically reproduce. Meaning that women, generally speaking, if they are capable of having babies, do. 100%. There's very few women throughout history who have been fertile who couldn't find a male suitor. Like, there's always a man willing to impregnate a woman. However, women tend to be very selective of men. So therefore, what you come up with is that, like, I realize that there's a bell curve with these things, but like, just imagine for, purposes of conversation here, that you have a 1 through 10 scale that we're all kind of familiar with. That there's the 1 that's the least desirable and a 10. Now let's also realize that not everything here is looks based. I mean, let's also be real that looks are a huge part of this, and that looks are a very desirable trait for both men and for women. However, like, there's other things like intelligence and ability to provide, violence. There's all sorts of little things that are important that come down to, mating strategies and things of their forth. But, let's do 5 as the middle and realize that, like, while for purposes of this argument that 6 through 10, are, half of the pool, there's much more people that are 6s in that half than 10s. So even though there's an even distribution here, realize that because of the bell curve, there's many more people closer to that 6 thing as the bell curve is going up in the middle. However, you're still dealing with half of the male population that we are completely getting rid of here as undesirable towards women. Okay, so you have 6 through 10 now that are available, and 1 through 10 of women that are available. So just with that alone, this is where you get that men are dogs, in the sense that the 5, because we're just going to use 10 people because it's a number we can all kind of grasp. I mean, there's 8 billion people, and I'm not going to get into the sex lives of all 8 billion people here. But, in a very easy to understand way, those 5 guys are impregnating those 10 women. So, how is that happening? So, the 9 and 10 male are getting a majority of these women. So, like, the 6 through 10 female, maybe the 10 female has a mating strategy. They're like, I'm going to get that 6 or 7 male. And I bet I could get him to be faithful to me because I have a very high opinion of myself because I'm an 8. Or excuse me, I'm a 10 and I'm better than him. So therefore I can foster monogamy. Okay. But the 9 and 10 male are with the, 7, 8, 9 female. Maybe a little bit of the 10, maybe she's cheating a little bit, even though monogamy was really important for her on her partner. And, picking up the scraps at the bottom. So, at some point, like, the 6 and 6 kind of pair up, and maybe they're monogamous. Or maybe, he's getting a little bit of the lesser women too, because, he's not having to deal with the nagging wife and whatever. And maybe the 3 female is married to the 3 male, but she doesn't give him any because, she's getting all of hers from, one of the upper, more desirable men that she actually wants to have children with. So the issue here becomes, well, women are like, well, guys are dogs. I'm like, okay. Yeah, the 9, the 8, the 10 male who is able to have whatever he wants because the women on the lower end of the spectrum are looking at their, equal parts in the male, and they're horrified because, again, women are much more selective than men are when it comes to this. So, and maybe, you have a girl who's a 3 and the guy's a 3, but he makes a lot of money. So you're like, for stability purposes, he needs to pay for the kid that aren't going to be his. So, again, you get into this idea that men are dogs because they're having sex with all 10, but it's like, well, of that top 5, 2 of them are monogamous. And then of the bottom 5, they're swearing that they would be monogamous because they'd just be so happy to have a wife to begin with, to the point that they are the ones married to a girl who doesn't put out, and the wife's cheating. So it isn't that men cheat more than women. Women statistically cheat way more than men do. They also are way more likely to initiate divorce because they're unhappy, because, again, they're looking at their partner and being like, that's not good enough. Or they're thinking, I'm married to a 5 or a 6, and I could do better because the 9 or 10 is willing to sleep with me. I bet I could bed him and lock him down and, convince him to marry me. And then they get out of the marriage, and all they get is sex offers from the upper echelon of men that they actually want, and they're like, well, this is freedom. And it's like, I don't, like, this is such a wrong idea, and the idea of marriage and monogamy, and of course it actually does benefit men. But it benefits women too, in the sense that, like, women don't want to be cheated on. They're actually way more emotional and way more bonded to their potential male partner, physiologically speaking. And, we get into these larger conversations about, well, is it right? Like, should men, have a higher body count versus women who are stigmatized? And it's like, here's the thing. For a man to say, I have a high body count, what he's actually saying is, I am in the upper echelons of men where women would even want me. If you're, in that scale of 10 men and 10 women that we've created, if one of those dudes has had sex with 7 or 8 of those women, that's something, right? Because there's 5 that are getting nothing. So he's basically, creating a stature for himself to the other men, saying, you got nothing and I have it all. I am better than you. For a woman, looking at the men, her being able to sleep with all of the men is nothing, because men have no standards when it comes to sex. Where men have standards, is in relationships. Being able to settle down, put their resources not only into you, but into your collective children. That is where men are selective. So women are the key holders to sex, and men are the key holder to relationships and to monogamy. 100%. So trying to say that is inherently wrong because it's not equal and because it's not the same is silly. It's a silly, silly concept. Because the problem here becomes women want the best of everything. Like, you have the girl who's a 3 and she wants the 10. And it's like that it doesn't work out that way. Like, the way that it needs to work out is that the girl who's a 3 accepts the man that's a 3 for his own faults. And she accepts that, like, hey, I may not have the best looking husband, he may not make the most money, but he's not going to potentially lose his income streams by fathering other children. All of that money and resources is going to be into the family, and I need to accept that for what it is. that's where things get better, because, what men want in terms of resources is they don't want to pay for children that are not theirs. It's a resource base. So it's like, I don't really want to pay for a child that's not mine, and maybe I don't want to pay for a child that is mine if it's not what I want my lineage to be. What women want is also resource-based, because, they have the child grow inside of them. There's a much more of a need of a link to that child when it's born. It needs the mother's milk. Mothers do tend to be more maternal to small children. But then they need also resources provided to them by the male companion afterwards. So largely what women are striving for is the man's resources once the baby is born. So, if the mating strategy is I'm going to get with a high-end person and get those high genes, there is a higher likelihood that that man is not going to give you his resources after. So pairing with someone who is willing to share resources with you, who's just happy to be near you, and maybe doesn't care that the baby is biologically his, is a mating strategy for women. Or finding someone that will actually, do what they say they will and be a father to said child that is theirs. That's a much better mating strategy, because, again, most men do not want to pay for something that is not theirs. Or if you're in that situation, you're the woman, and the man is going off and knocking someone else up, you don't want to have to split resources with other women. Or the other child, I should say, because you have a child, and it needs college, and it needs clothes, and it needs food. So you don't want to eat less and have less resources because he's out doing something else. So it's all mating strategies. And it's all this idea of, am I being taken care of, and who's taking care of who? I also think it comes back to this idea of earners and women in the workplace and what that does to society. So, the idea that women need to be in the workplace is silly. Like, what women are actually most happy doing is being at home with their children. And the reason for that is, if you are not at home taking care of your children, who is? So the answer there is childcare or family. Now, family I get, and I'm very thankful for the bits of family that have been there for me. But generally speaking, it's childcare, which means a stranger. So you're giving your child to the state, or you're giving it to a stranger, and you're saying, please raise my child and don't hurt it. Which means you're always missing moments. You're also not instilling morals and values into that child. Like, it's basically not your child anymore. It's the person who's raising its child. So you're first going to have anxiety about child. Where is my child? Is it being taken care of? All of those things. And then you're missing those moments. You're also realizing that that child is not as much a reflection of you as you may like it to be. I also find that women are just not as happy or productive in the workplace as men are. In fact, men are less productive with women in the workplace. You also have this idea of inflation. And so, just to give you an idea, in 1960, I want to say minimum wage was like $30 an hour or something ridiculous, right? So why was that? Well, because there was less workers, one. And two, we were actually able to control the value of things by flooding the market and flooding all these things. There's no value in currency anymore. There's no value in workforce. There's no value in anything. Because, this idea of being practical and responsible for things, it's gone out the window. When you look at women and voting and suffrage and all the things, getting off of the gold standard, wars have gone up and increased because you have a percentage of the population voting on wars that don't have to fight them. So, we've gotten into this crazy space where there's no responsibility for the decisions that are being made. It's all one group of people messing with a system and asking somebody else to deal with it. So, where is the current ideal for men? So a lot of people have gone through this like MGTOW, men going their own way thing. And I think that there's definitely some value to that. I think that there is value in bringing up your brand and taking care of yourself as a human being, being able to take care of yourself, being able to find your own, focuses and drives and priorities and morals in life. And it's much, much more difficult to find a woman who, women are out doing whatever women are doing, and then, so many guys' lives are destroyed by divorce and alimony and child support and men coming after them for pregnancies. And it's like, just being able to focus on what you're doing and making people's lives better and doing things that are in your best interest. When something comes along that doesn't actually speak to your value, it's much, much, you're just not swayed by it. There's no, once you become strong enough to take care of yourself, somebody, trying to trade your freedom for, gifts, those gifts don't have any sway or any value to you because you don't need them. And not being able to need things is maybe the most, that's what women all want. And yet they don't value it because marketing has told them not to. And it's just sad. It's where society is crumpling.